I'm very grateful to God and I'm very grateful to AA, which is the name of a book, from which the fellowship, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. A little bit about myself before I start on the topic. I was born in Bangalore in May 1947. So thus I'm in my 73rd year. And I came from a very simple, normal family. My father was a lawyer. My mother was a housewife. And they were very austere, simple people. My father was a lawyer, very intelligent. But he had some sort of a disdain for material things. He didn't value material stuff as much as most people do. Very austere, and he lived a very, what I think is a very spiritual life. Okay, so as I was saying, I come from a very simple, ordinary family. My father was a very austere person, and he was non-materialistic totally. He passed away at the age of 100 years and 9 days in 2007. So he lived a very straight life, and he expected us also to be the same. And I grew up in a very tight environment where he was very particular about what we did, and he didn't shower us with material stuff. So there was always a shortage of, to me, it appeared to be a shortage of things that I thought I needed, but actually I wanted. Now, very early in life, I was sent to a public school, a boarding school, when I was 9 years old. And after that, I finished my senior Cambridge, and I joined the National Defence Academy in December 1962. I graduated in 1965. Then I went into the Navy. I did my engineering in the Navy. And of course, later on, I did my postgraduate in engineering. And then I went on to serve in the Navy in different ships and different assignments. And eventually, I sought premature retirement in 1991. I attained the rank of paid rank of a Commodore, and I decided to see what the real world was like, because in the Navy we lived a very cloistered, very protected environment. So I went out. Now that is as generally, and then I retired finally in 2009, towards the end of 2008, from industry as well. And then I settled down in Bombay and Bangalore. But now I live mostly in Bangalore and about half the year in the US with my children and grandchildren. So that is as far as my very, very general, very brief sketch on my life. Now I can, as for far long as I can remember, I was a very, the age of 4, 5. My memories are very, very sketchy, but I was not a very happy child. I was always wanting something, not getting it, and consequently causing a lot of pain to my mother. Very scared of my father, very fearful because he was very austere himself. And so I grew up in that environment. As I grew up, my wants kept increasing. I began to believe that my wants were my needs. Instead of making my needs my wants, I made my wants my needs. And As I went into the Navy, I was commissioned into the Navy. I started, getting paid, became an officer, and for the first time, I had money at my disposal, and I could do what I wanted to do. I was, and that was the first time that I had alcohol. Very early in my life, I had realized that, people must like me, you know, because I wanted to. I found in school that unless I behaved in a certain way, I was not popular, and I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be liked by other kids and so on. So that started the habit of people pleasing and also pretending. And later on, of course, I picked up people punishing in my head, you know. So my life basically was just three things: people pleasing. Of course, I was very ambitious. And I like to think that I achieved some sort of a degree of success. Uh, I don't know how that happened, but my career was going fine. But as I said, I was introduced to alcohol. And in the beginning, I felt so great that alcohol is such a feeling. I could, drop all my inhibitions and, stop pretending for that brief moment, stop people pleasing, do what I wanted to do. And I felt comfortable for a while. Uh, Gradually, alcohol, began to play a greater and greater role. And as I look back, I think by 1973, although I was not drinking every day, but when I drank to the hilt. I had what you call hollow legs. I could, very high capacity for tolerance of alcohol. I could drink copious quantities of alcohol without getting drunk in the beginning. Of course, much later I came to know that is the first symptom of alcoholism, a physical allergy to alcohol, because I was metabolizing alcohol differently from the other people. So that is how alcohol came to play a bigger and bigger role in my life. And anything that I didn't get which I thought was wanted, um, I was very uncomfortable. I was restless, I was irritable, I was discontented, of course. And I got married in 1974. I married a very simple girl from a very simple family. Prior to that, in the Navy as a young officer in Bombay, I had a number of relationships with girls, and all were traumatic relationships, because I was internally screwed up totally. So I could never hold a good relationship. And also, I think looking back, because of my internal condition, I attracted people also with similar internal conditions. So that's the way I went about it. And finally, I got so fed up of being fed up. I came home to Bangalore and told my father to find me a simple girl from a simple family. And I got married. And my career was going fine, as I said, but my drinking kept escalating and got more and more into resentments against my wife, against my wife's parents, um, and I was very dissatisfied. Um, Although I was doing well, somehow I missed the opportunity to go abroad because that was where one could save some money. All my money used to go down into the messes, the clubs, and entertaining people like a big shot. I would call around for drinks for everybody on the bar, and I became more and more miserable. Miserable. Eventually, things got pretty bad for me internally. Externally, of course, as I said, I was used to pretending, so it looked good on the outside. And in fact, I was If you talk to me those days, first thing I would, if I got to know you a little bit, I would start complaining about, how unlucky I am and how unfortunate my circumstances and so on. So I was a constant cribber, complaining all the time. And I remember some very good friends of mine in the Navy would turn around and ask me, Sunil, what are you complaining about? Yeah, you got everything good going for you. But I couldn't see anything good at all. I was looking for what was not okay, and I didn't look at what was okay. You know, so finally, alcohol, because I was so uncomfortable, I needed more and more of it, and I couldn't reach the first experience I had with alcohol. I kept trying to chase that, and I never could really relive my initial experience with alcohol. So it was a hopeless state of mind and body that I reached. And one Sunday, I remember it was 16th of December 1979. I was sitting at home and I saw a Sunday newspaper with a small ad saying that if you have a desire to stop drinking, call so and so number. There was just one telephone number there. So I called that number and to cut a long story short, next day was a Monday, 17th of December 1979. I found myself in a meeting. My first meeting, I didn't listen to anything. I mean, I was just watching people. I was just hearing some noises and smelling and just watching people and wondering what they were doing there. And I knew I had read a lot. I was a voracious reader by that time. So I knew what Alcoholics Anonymous was. And the word alcoholic was a terrible word for me because I thought, oh my God, I'm a senior. At that point of time, as a lieutenant commander in the Navy, career going fine, everything going well. And I said, what kind of a mess have I landed in? Mind you, I went to this meeting thinking that I need to stop drinking, and I tried different methods and I couldn't stop. But once having gone there, I was actually gathering evidence to prove that I was not an alcoholic. That is the kind of level of dishonesty that I had. So anyway, many good things happened. One was that I met my first sponsor, who passed away very early. He was a very dynamic A. In fact, if today we have GSO, I would say that he passed away before the GSO was set up. That was unfortunate because I would like to feel that he was instrumental in really getting things going. But at that point, we had only one enter group, and that was in Bombay. And I met him on that first meeting. He gave me his card. I was very impressed with his card. He had a car. Those days, Fiats were, if you had a Fiat car, you had made it, that kind of thing. If you drove an Ambassador, you're second grade. So I was very impressed with him. And I found that he lived in the same building as Nutan lived, Sagar Sangeet in Colaba in Bombay. And I was really impressed. I said, my God, I must get friendly with this guy. So he attracted me. Because I was a very, very materialistic fellow, and because I came from, a position of want, scarcity. I was constantly wanting something which I didn't have. That was and so anybody who had something which I didn't have, I thought, might as well get close to the fellow. That's how I landed up with my first sponsor. But, I would stay sober. I'd go to meetings for 2-3 months, then again go out. And funny thing is that a lot of good things started happening in the Navy for me. I went for a course to the Military College of Telecommunication Engineering to do my computer course for 4 or 5 months. And I stood first and came back with a gold medal and all that. And I thought to myself, my God, how can I be an alcoholic, So out again for about 3-4 months. Then in June of 1980, I was on the 26th of June, got promoted to a commander. I said, my God. And I was the youngest commander at that time in the Navy. I said, 33, I'm a commander. How the hell can I say that I'm an alcoholic, So anyway, that was my idea of life. I thought everything revolved around what people thought of me, material things, and how people were to me. Constantly people were doing things to me, or not doing things to me, or saying things to me, or not saying things to me. Extremely unhappy. And things got worse. My drinking kept going up and up. And, finally I threw in the towel and I was totally drunk I took some leave from my work. I was commanding the only naval computer center at that time. Uh, I went to my sponsor's house, first sponsor's house at night, on the 27th of March, 1982. And I told him that, please help me, I want to, help me to just stop drinking, I just can't do it. So I stayed there with him that night, and I just stayed with him through the next day, through the next day after that. Wherever he went, I went. If he went for a meeting, I went for a meeting. If he went to his work site, I went. He was an architect and a builder in Bombay. He had a number of sites. I would go to the site. I would sit with him till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and go home. I had a rickety Lambretta scooter. The silencer was tied with a string, ball tires. So materially, I was a zook because all my money I'd drawn from the Provident Fund, because after 15 years, you know that you can pull out from Provident Fund. So I'd withdrawn that. I had no bank balance. I had taken loans from many of my friends. In fact, they'd stopped giving me money. They were very fond of me, but they said no. I used to ask them for money, and they would say, I'd tell them, of course, I'll return it. And I would return it, but they had stopped giving me money. Anyway, and I had two small children by that time, you know. One was 6-year-old and the other one was 1.5. But that was, and I had no possessions, no house, no nothing. So that was where I threw in my towel, and I was not fortunate enough to go to a hospital or a rehab. Those days there were no rehabs, and I couldn't have gone even if there was one. And so I just, I came out cold turkey, and so that's what happened, in my life. And from that day, I started staying sober, 28th of March, 1982. And I was very uncomfortable without alcohol, very uncomfortable. I look at some people who come to AA and they start staying sober from day one, and they seem to do it with such ease. I couldn't do it like that. I had to find out some solution, some strong solution. And my first sponsor told me the solution is in the book. So start reading the book with me. So I started reading the book. He says Alcoholics Anonymous Fellowship is taken its name from a book. So if you're in AA, then you got to be in the book. So I said, okay, fine. So I started reading the big book, word by word, trying to understand, grasp, and absorb gradually. And so that's how my journey started. But the key thing here is that I surrendered, because I was really fed up of being fed up. I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted something. I wanted to live well. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be free of this incessant noise in the head. And I wanted to be, released of this terrible brain of mine. And that is how my journey started. So from that point, I would like to, because the topic is surrender, my experience with surrender, I would say that everything in my life today, now today it's a very different thing. Like I said, I went into industry. I use the A principles at work. At one time, I was the MD of a company with 7,500 people. So my output depended on many people. But I use the principles of the A program to run companies. I got to know finance. I learned finance. I was a naval engineer, but I picked up finance. And I went on to serve 17 years in the industry. And I finally retired. And there's one very important thing that My first sponsor told me, he said, look, if you if your needs at a level A and your wants are at level B, which is much higher than the needs, you have to bring the wants down to your needs. And then you see what happens to what you have. Because at that point of time, what I had was lower than what I needed. So I lowered my wants. I said, my base level is this. I need a bed and I need food. I need to pay fees for my children, and that's it. And I said, and he said, just go about doing your work using the principles. Don't stop thinking about what others are thinking of you. He says, you live in your mind. I said, yes, I do. I can't live elsewhere. He says, wherever you go, you'll always live in your mind. And, you got to make your mind a good place to live in. I said, how do I do it? So as I read the book, I came to realize that I had to surrender to a power greater than myself. I couldn't live without that, I had to learn to live. Today, I live to learn. Because I want to learn to live, I live to learn. I learn from people who just come in, who have been there for long, and everyone that's in AA. I just listen. At every meeting, I try to listen very intently to what anyone is sharing, because, he's sharing about his life. And so I had to surrender to God and seek help. And every line in the book, tells me how important it is. We read chapter 5 in every meeting all over the world. I've done, by the way, incidentally, I've done meetings almost all over the world, whether it's European countries, in the US where I live now, whether South Africa, South America, Russia, India, of course. And, so we read chapter 5, and there's one statement which is enough for me. It says, without help, it is too much for me, but there is one, and that one is O capital, one, who has all power. And that one, again O capital, is God, full stop. That's it. That is the best theosophical and complete theosophical statement for me. It works for me. So I need help all the time, 24/7. And there is only one power which is presiding over everything. And I need that power. So, this realization that life could be very simple if I relied on a power greater than myself, which is God, who has all power. And I understood. I read chapter 4. I still read it every day, almost every day, because it tells me, because there is a sentence, it says, lack of power was my dilemma, is my dilemma. And it says, where and how do I find this power? And the next sentence is, that is exactly what this book is about. That's what the chapter 4 on page 45, the big book, says. It says, where and how do I find this power? It says, that is exactly what this book is about. And then it goes on to tell me what is this power, where is it in page 53, and tells me where to find it in page 55. So, and how to find it. So I'm so grateful to AA, the big book, and the people in AA. And my life is completely different today. I couldn't imagine that I had to become an alcoholic or be an alcoholic to find the simple solution to my life. I live free, more than happy and joyous, I'm free. I don't have noise in my head today. I rarely think about what others are thinking of me, because I know that it'll kill me if I start thinking about what others are thinking of me. I know that I've got to think well of them. That's what makes my mind a good place to live in. So my life really depends on how well I think of others. Doesn't matter at all what they think of me. So these things have all come to me through the practice of surrender. a little bit about the role of surrender in my life. At birth, um, I was totally surrendered. And if I try to remember way back, go back earliest memories, they're not below the age of 4 or 5. So that tells me that I had no self when I was born. There's no identity. And my brain made me acquire an identity and separated myself from everything else. I became I, you know, and I like to believe that, at birth, I was one with everything there is. And at death, again, I'll be one with everything there is. I don't know because I've not experienced death so far. But the time in between my birth and my death is the problem. And the problem seems to me is the lack of surrender and separation from people and everything outside of me. So Alcoholics Anonymous has helped me to do away to some great extent with the sense of separation from people and from things around me. All people, whether in A, outside A, everything. So I've had my share of difficulties. I still do. This is not to say that there are no difficulties in life. They'll always be there, always. Difficult situations. But I have no problems. They are very difficult situations. But because my mind is free, I'm able to decide what I need to do and can do, or need to say and can say. I try to do that and immediately surrender the outcome to God. So first I accept the situation completely, that this is what it is. Because my mind is clear, where it is clear, I'm able to figure out what I need to do and can do. I try to do that and immediately surrender the outcome. This simple formula has worked for me in my business life, in my family life, with my children, with my friends, with and everything. Because I had to be free before I could understand this very simple formula. So, for me, surrender is entirely an inner phenomenon. It is not, I don't have to look surrendered. I thought surrender means looking surrendered. It's got nothing to do with the way I look. If I'm not surrendered, it is shown. I'll get affected by things outside of me. If I'm not surrendered, I'm affected all the time by people, places, and things outside of me. There's a very nice plaque which is still there. I visited Dr. Bob's home recently in Akron, Ohio. And I had made, that was my dream because, now a little bit of myself comes in. What I found out, because I used to read, I've read I still do, every piece of A literature about everything about A. And suddenly realized somewhere in 1983 that Bill met Bob for the first time on the 12th of May, 1935, exactly 12 years to the day before I was born. But that day I decided I must get to this place where they met. So I went and visited the Henrietta Sibberling's gatehouse where they met. I went to Dr. Bob's home, and for me it was a great spiritual experience because Bill had, of course, surrendered, because of his during when he was the last hospitalization in Towns Hospital in New York, and that started, a fellowship, a spiritual, practice which has spread all over the world, which has helped people like me, who was a, very stupid, inconsiderate, self-centered person in understanding how to live just by surrendering. That in Bill's story, he says, there I humbly offered myself to God. And, that's all that's the way it started, So for me, surrender is the most important thing, without which I cannot live. I can live in the sense I can exist with all the noise in the head, the discomfort, and frustration and getting affected, and it diminishes my capacity to deal with life. When I'm free, my head is free because I surrendered. Because when I surrender, um, I'm able to decide what I need to do. So it's such a great blessing to be, um, you know, be in this program, be in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Uh, I would just like to summarize a few things that I practice now, try to practice. I have, what I call a domain principle, which I use. My domain is what I think, what I say, and what I do. What I think, what I say, and what I do is my domain. Again, rest, everything is in God's domain. And if I try to get into God's domain and try to control things, I'm instantly punished in my head, in my mind. So I've learned in my life to surrender everything that is not in my domain and just focus only what is in my domain. And that domain principle has really helped me. It is helping me, and if I abide by that, I know that it will continue to help me. So, I'm so grateful that I've been able to understand a few simple things like this through the big book and through the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide. Um, um, so, as I said, there's one thing to believe that surrender is important for me, but I had to know through experience that surrender is the only way for me. So for me, believing is not good enough. I have to know, and I can only know through experience. So it's no wonder that in the serenity prayer, it says, God grant me the serenity to accept. And the second verb there is to change the thing that I can. And the third is to know the difference between what I cannot change and what I can change. To me, the serenity prayer, everything that is in the book, the people in AA are very sacred, very sacred. And I have to hold them with sacred trust as something which has given me my life, and which will continue to help me to go through whatever situations that come my way. Even currently, I go through a number of situations which are very daunting, which are very difficult, which seem seem to defy resolution. But I know that if I just keep in a surrendered state, they will get resolved. At least in my head, they're resolved already because of the surrender. But if they don't, again, it is still not in my domain. What is in my domain, I must do right. That is it. The last thing I want to say is that because of all this, if I have guilt or fear before, during, and after doing anything, I don't do it. I try not to do it. So that again has kept me, free of noise. I try to, if there is guilt and fear, before, during, and after doing anything, I try not to do it. And these simple rules are learned only through AA and the classrooms of AA. I think I've spoken long enough, shared long enough, and I can continue to talk. I thank you all for listening. Grateful to all of you. God bless you.
Thank you, Sunil, for the wonderful sharing. And we would love to hear more. In fact, there's a question for you right here. Vinay is asking this. How has practice of surrender changed for you in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s?
Okay.
Sunil, you're there? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Vinay. Um, you know, I know, and I think you know as well, that we are on this journey, and we are. I'm trying to make progress all the time. So this practice of surrender has also progressed through the years. There are a lot of ups and downs, but generally, if I look at the way things have gone, and if I draw a straight line, it seems to be going higher. Uh, but there are times when surrender is missing, then I get punished in my head instantly. And then again, I, try to surrender and keep to my domain. And everything, goes back again, the reset, the reset button. I keep pressing and it goes back to that. But I think it's a matter of progress. I would say that my freedom has increased over the years. I rarely think about what others are thinking of me. Can't remember the last time I thought. I can't remember the last time when I got into a fit of anger. Generally, I think in the 40s, well, I know that if for most people as well as me, 40s are, the peak thing in your career and so on. You get very busy with life, children are growing up, and 50s, they get married. And so there are a lot of things happen, and that grandchildren come and they get relocated. In my case, both the kids are away in the US. I didn't plan it that way, and I miss them. But that's why I keep going to and fro. So, but surrender is something which I would like to. This question is very pertinent and has made me think about it. I think it has increased slowly because if I don't increase it, I know that trouble will seek me out and make me increase my surrender. If I don't seek surrender on my own, and trouble is going to compel me to seek it. So that's the way it is. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you. Thank you.
Anurag, any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm alcoholic Rijik from Jaipur. Hello.
Yeah, Rajiv.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just wanting to know that could you just quote it with an example that uh, what because you have explained it enough and very beautifully that what is the importance of surrender, but how do you actually surrender yourself? If you could quote it with an example, it will be easier to understand.
Hmm.
Sunil,
Okay.
may I help you with this?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
May I have your permission?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rajik, you've seen a Fauji guy surrendering to, to his enemy? You must have seen in the movies also.
Quite
अगर वैसे
right.
नहीं देखा तो what does he do? Can you explain?
You put You put your arms down.
Yeah.
The thumb,
Hand on
which
your
is
head.
upward, it goes down.
Yeah.
And my head is bowed.
Yeah. And you wait for directions.
Yes.
That is what we have to do. Thank you, Sunil. Please carry on.
Thank you very much. I think you answered the question very well, Anurag. Thank you. So, it is surrender is practice of surrender in the beginning is quite painful, but it's as you keep progressing, there's less and less pain. That's one sign of progress. If surrendering is causing pain, that's the beginning. But as you go along and you keep progressing, your pain there's less pain in surrender. It's joy, it's freedom, more of freedom. That much I can say. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a question from Pavan. I think he's asking, sir, what do you say AA members who break their anonymity?
Uh, this is, I mean, this is out of my topic, but since, it's an A, and with your permission, I'll answer this.
Yeah, please.
You see, A is not an organization. So, first of all, I cannot enforce or make somebody do something. In fact, trying to make someone do something, even outside A, is lack of surrender. So there's, I wouldn't break my anonymity, and I can only practice personal, a personal program with the help of people. So the whole thing boils down to this: that I need to practice anonymity myself, so that the others are sort of assured that their anonymity is going to be preserved. Now that we're on this subject, I would like to just say that, many of you have probably gone to international conventions. They're very careful. They don't have these big banners outside conventions saying Alcoholics Anonymous. Because by association, I'm breaking the guy's anonymity, the fellow is walking in. So very, very careful, even through association. Like, a lot of people visit me at home in Bangalore and in the US, and they come in all shapes and forms, as you know, in A, many of them are young, some of them are very old. They come from different, vocations, different professions. And, my neighbors who are very close to me keep wondering, how is it that I have a steady stream of people coming in? But even today, they don't know that I'm in AA, or the people coming to me are from AA or something. So, it's so unimportant, because I was so possessed with this business of self-importance that I come to AA and then I want importance for being in AA. So that's all to do with self-centeredness. Now, you can't compel someone to keep his anonymity, but it's all by personal example that we can, and the study of traditions, practicing traditions. Traditions are personal to me. They are not something to be followed only by the committees or, delegates or trustees or something. They have to be followed by me at a personal level, because my personal recovery depends upon the traditions. So it's just like steps. The traditions are very, very sacred and very important. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a few more questions here. Just one second. Yeah. Saurav asks, how to get rid of indecisiveness and anger, which is the most annoying thing in me. Does surrender helps, and how you got rid of these? How to pray for these to Almighty?
Uh, speaking for myself, I would like to say that my solution has come from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm in A, that is, I'm in the book, and I discuss the book with everyone who meets me. And, I find solutions in the big book. Everything: anger, resentments, self-pity, fear, guilt, all that, dishonesty, all solutions for me I found from the big book. It's very simple, but it has to be, I have to read it, understand it, grasp it, and absorb it through practice. There's no shortcut, unfortunately. I have to go through these 4 processes: read it, understand it, grasp it, and absorb it through practice. 4 things. I have to listen or read, one of the 2. To understand, I have to grasp, and I have to absorb. And only absorption is only possible through practice. That's what I would like to say. And
Yeah.
thank you.